Hey guys, this is Kevin Smith Jr., your host for the Container Happy Hour. Grab a drink, join us every 2 weeks, and we'll talk containers and future of the market.
Okay.
So here we are again with your Container Happy Hour. I am really honored to have my good friend Tiffany Buchanan with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So she has selected a red blend for us, for all of you out there drinking along with the Container Happy Hour. Cheers to you. All right, nice choice, Tiff. Excellent work.
Thanks.
Your role, you are the general manager over M&R operations for Ports America, right?
That's correct.
Okay, that's a big title. There's a lot that goes with that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And you're over multiple locations. What?
Correct. So at our office in Houston, we have a backroom service team.
Okay.
And that team supports our outer port operations. So we do the M&R in New Orleans, we do the M&R in Tacoma, Washington, and Tampa, Florida. And we are just kind of getting into the new M&R stage in Freeport.
Okay, and all of that falls under your head?
Underneath myself and my department.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Tell us, well, I guess we'll start from the beginning, just to let everybody kind of piece together things. Do you remember when you and I met? Do you have any recollection of that?
So we had mutual friends. Of course, I knew your father through the industry. We did a lot of business, Ports America did, with Robert Young.
Yep.
And we met at a Big IANA conference in Atlanta.
That's right.
You guys were going to be traveling to Dallas like the following week. And then, of course, obviously we saw each other and reconnected at Rodeo, Houston, and barbecue cook-off.
And we may have had cocktails.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, probably so. Quick tangent, though, and we'll go back to the industry, but you mentioned the rodeo. That's something you're really involved with.
I'm a 23-year volunteer, and I've been on about 5 committees over the 23 years, and I've held 6 different leadership roles.
Wow, that's impressive. So for anyone that's not familiar with it, look up the Houston Rodeo. Incredible event. Basically, the month of March around here is kind of a giant party. But we give so much money to scholarships, so much good that happens out of that for youth in the agricultural community, their college education, everything about it. So I think that's a great thing. So thank you for doing that. That's
Absolutely.
a really cool thing. Sorry for that tangent, though.
Yeah, no worries.
So start back at the beginning a little bit and go through kind of how you got into this crazy industry.
So I started in the industry 25 years ago. I'm on my 26th service year, and kind of started as an administrative role.
Okay.
It was in December, very slow. Kind of didn't really understand why they had hired me, but okay. So I had the opportunity to work out in the operation with the mechanics.
At this point, was this something you were interested in, or it was just a job?
It was just a job.
Okay.
It was just a job. I mean, it was very dirty.
Right.
But it was a job, and that's really never would have dreamed that things would have transpired and developed to where we are today.
Sure.
Worked out one-on-one with the mechanics for a number of years, and really began to like the industry as a whole. Over time, of course, you had your old school longshoremen, which were not really so much favorable for a woman being there. But then there was a younger generation that really kind of took me under their wing and molded me and educated me and trained me to where I'm at today.
So did you see that transition, that evolution actually kind of happen during your career? Of that old school view versus,
a little bit. About 3 or 4 years had passed by. My boss was leaving the company to go to California, and there was no women in the industry at all. And they were very well thought of coming into the industry. So I was looking to pursue other opportunities. This was way back before the TMM Americana ships, merged together. So Light's brothers had reached out about going into a sales position. And I was like, wow, okay. So, I was very open. I did not know that side of the industry, but they were going to allow me to travel from department to department to learn the back side of the industry.
Okay.
All I knew was it's on the ship's out the back door, we're going to discharge it and we're going to load it back. Never knowing the front end of the business on how the cargo got loaded in the containers and actually got slid to go on the vessel. So I was very honest with them when I interviewed and told them that if the opportunity ever came that I could run that operation, then I had to go back. And I was there about a week, and I had never really worked with women, so that was a little bit different in itself.
Right.
But so I went and met one of the other bosses and agreed to take on the role of the M&R manager of the operation. So I did that operation, and in that time we were purchased by another company, which back in the day was P&O Ports.
Right.
And so I'm merging two operations together that were actually competitors, and knocking the fence down and bringing the teams together. And really where I'm at today is the customers. The customers, allowed me and gave me the opportunity to continue to pursue, my position in the company. So I ran the operation for about 10 years. Then I moved out of the operation into the corporate world. For procurement, and that also allowed me to have the exposure and the visibility to, break bulk operations. I was heavily involved in the military, doing all of our RFP proposals, and actually gave me the opportunity to see the actual sites and be all of our operations in Texas.
Right.
Other than just M&R.
And is that when you became really well-rounded?
So that's I moved back into operations about 8 years ago. I am back in M&R like I was before, but I do have the diversity of the industry as a whole, to know a little bit about all of it.
Sure.
And see it, front and center, and how it's changed, and the different challenges that come today.
Well, it's a very impressive career trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt about it. And you're also involved in the IANA, right?
Correct. I'm on the
And you sit
M&R
on the
committee.
board, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm on the M&R committee with IANA, and I represent Ports America.
That's a pretty involved role. Are you guys involved with actual criteria and legislation and kind of the enforcement across industry, or what
Not
dynamic
really.
do you
Yeah,
focus
not
on?
really at that level.
Right.
A lot of your big chassis pull operators and some of the customers, obviously, that sit on that board, they're business owners.
Sure.
They're the ones that are going to legislature and the different bills that are being passed, or the things that we're trying to get thrown out or
Tariff
roadblocked.
imposition.
So basically from our position, it's, coming out with a training manual to train,
Right.
Mechanics. We're on the front and center to know kind of, what's going to go on with the FMCSA, the future around the inspections, the criterias. So that's what, and most of it's meetings. We have an operations committee, and we have the M&R. So we have built like a platform deck for people to go to, like a resource. People could go on there and order these training catalogs. So there's all kinds of opportunities.
That's very cool. So let's take a step back for anyone that may be listening or watching this and maybe doesn't even realize the difference between what you do and what I do.
Okay.
Right? So humor me in this, and maybe just explain a little bit about the diversity between a port-related activity and an off-dock terminal like EMS.
Okay, so the containers that discharge and load back on the vessels, they all basically it's a round trip. So the container's loaded, comes into the port authority, it's on the vessel, you're going to discharge it, goes to the consignee, it's going to get stripped. The empty gets returned back to the depot, and then of course that container will either get repaired, it'll go through a full inspection, and then it'll possibly leave the depot, get loaded again. It can either go over the road on a rail, or it could load back as an empty on the vessel and be repositioned to a different port location. All of the containers that get loaded, obviously they're inspected to make sure that they meet the union major damage criteria. If it does meet that, then of course nothing can be loaded back damaged. It has to be repaired.
And I think that's a big factor there. Like
yes.
you're under union labor.
That's correct.
Where we're not being off dock. Right. So that's and that's not true of all off dock terminals, of course. But, But in this particular instance, that's a big difference in our operations.
Yes.
Right.
In most off-dock operations or your rail ramp operations, those typically are non-union. And realistically, it makes sense. I mean, if you're going to do an off-dock facility, Ports America's being a union employer, we have to use union labor. But with that being said, if you had a customer that wants to open up an off-dock facility and let's do a joint venture together and have a common gate. Well, and you're running, parallel with the Port Authority, well, then you have to run the same gate hours, the same business structure. So sometimes that can be costly when you're using union labor.
Sure. I'm sure it's a big dynamic. Now, we're seeing a lot in the off-dock application where there's pressure from both sides, really, where you're getting rate pressure from the client base as far as your service platform, right? Like your labor hours, your storage rates, your gate fees, all those kind of things. You're getting a lot of that downward pressure fighting the rate, which is normal in any sector, right? But we're also getting a lot of pressure to provide more service, improve our technology, increase turn times, do all these things. So that middle point that, for lack of a better explanation, the marginability is really getting pushed, right? Squeezed out.
Right.
Do you have a similar type of problem? Do you have a similar dynamic on the port where you guys are you have to always be pushing your technology and your improvement and your service platform, but at the same time, you can't just blatantly charge more for it?
Right. Well, in our industry, obviously, the shippers are getting the push.
Right.
I mean, you got to fill the vessel.
Sure.
So they're under tight demands there and financial constraints. Those obviously are going to continue to roll to our end on the M&R.
Right.
Task times, the tariffs that are coming out. 20 years ago, nobody had their own tariff.
Right.
You had your own house tariff.
Now they're independent.
And now everybody's incorporated their own. You're finding more and more companies forming their own procurement departments. They're, reevaluating behind the scenes of the different operations where they do business.
Sure.
And basically putting those tariffs side by side and saying, okay, well, over here you're doing it for a quarter of an hour. Well, and over here you're charging 0.10.
Right.
Where that's where you have to really paint the picture for your customer and say, look, I mean, if you're welding, you got to gear up. You got to have time to get your helmet on. You got to have time to get your torch ready. I mean, so there's the whole staging. You don't just roll out of one task and then straight into another.
I think that's a fantastic point. And I think it's something that gets lost a lot in the disconnect across this industry is that we have a lot of clients, we probably share some or we know common people that are in a more corporate environment and they're incredibly smart people. But as it relates to the doing, they might not connect those dots, right? And we're kind of boots on the ground, literally at this level saying, we have to gear up. That guy doesn't just clock
They
in
don't really know the nature of our industry.
Right. He's not welding for that full 8 hours.
Right.
And so we have to account for that in our overall cost basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's difficult. And we're also seeing a challenge in labor capacity. Like I'm sure you're seeing that, right? The skill
set is a lot different than it was 20 years ago. So of course you've got your time constraints on the task times.
Sure.
That's a huge challenge. And then your labor skill set. You're almost at the mercy to train them on your own. And of course, I think there's been a lot of discussions about coming up with training programs and so forth. The other side of that is the financial responsibility and what opportunities are there for an employer? If we're going to sow money into this program, what are the financial rewards for us
or rewards
at the end?
Right.
And so that's something that is still yet to be determined.
I think that's really where there's an opportunity yet still. For some of these associations or groups to align themselves and look at that, because that's really the fundamental piece is how much can a group like Ports America or a group like EMS or somebody like that afford to put into training, right? But also operating under the premise that we may train this guy to make him better only to leave us. Right? There is no insulation there.
Absolutely.
For us. And we're teaching a very unique set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think that's a really interesting point in probably a whole nother discussion. Like we could have a whole episode on just how do we enact some kind of training programs and benefits to encourage employment, but also insulate the groups that are kind of funding it.
Well, and too, I think in today's time, it's really getting on to the level, the personal level with the mechanic.
Right.
And show your appreciation and your bite. I think you're going to get the loyalty back from that mechanic to say, okay, hey, they really do care about me. Right. I show up for work every day. It's a partnership.
Yeah, there's a human element to
Absolutely.
This. And I think I know you've lived this transition and I've seen it as well, where the way you talk to people now and the way you manage people now is a lot different.
Oh, absolutely.
And the way people respond is a lot different, right? And you think back and it used to be, hey, you messed that up, I'm going to yell at you, I'm going to reprimand you, and you're going to never do it again. Right? Or it was almost like fear management, right? And that doesn't work today.
Right.
It shouldn't work today. Let me
well,
stress that.
And you go, today, in today's time, I go through routine audits with customers.
Right.
The workmanship. And I think it shows a lot on our end if we do find a mistake. Get the mechanic over there. It's not really so much to point the finger of blame.
No, it could be a teachable moment.
Right. It's you did this caulking job. This isn't quite really the way that we would like to see it.
Right.
This is the way we would like to see it.
Right.
And so hopefully that can be a reminder to them, but it also shows due diligence with your customer.
Right. I think
I think that goes a long way in the relationship.
Yeah, because they're 9 times out of 10 they're trusting you with their fleet and their operation sight unseen.
Yes.
So that's really important that they feel reassured in that dynamic, right? Let's go down kind of a different road, kind of stay in the industry, but move away from all these challenges we're talking about. Tell me a little bit about if there was any hurdles, or do you think challenges related to just being a female in this business? Did you notice that to be something challenging? Did you notice that, because this isn't exactly something that young girls aspire to do, right?
Right.
So how did you see that evolve, and did you see that being something that really became more prevalent, or do you think we're still kind of in that growth phase?
I I think that we do have a lot of women that want to get into the industry. I think a lot of it, if they're easily intimidated, they can shy away. I think the most important thing that I have learned in my young years is I kept my personal world away from the waterfront and away from our operations.
Okay.
I think that that's important. You're probably going to go through a time where you have no personal life because really you're having to prove yourself and let the labor pool or whoever it be see that you really are interested to be there.
Right.
You want to be there. And I would have never dreamed I'd be 25 years later. It's had some challenges, but the other side of that coin is having the mentorship that I've had and keeping my personal world away from the waterfront.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has allowed me the reputation
Right.
on a great personal level, because no matter where you go in the industry, if you stay within this or you go onto the shipper side of the business or wherever it be, that reputation stays with you.
Sure.
And you want to be known for that person that's made a difference.
Right.
And you've paved that road and that opportunity for other women.
So even though it's been difficult and you've had to create this path for yourself, it's also afforded you a great career.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And a lot
And
of
friendships. And I'm very grateful the level of knowledge that I have. I have a lot of longshoremen to thank for that.
At this point, do you see yourself ever doing anything else?
Probably not.
Right. So you're a
Probably
lifer.
not.
You're officially a lifer.
It's I still find it very fascinating today to sit
Sure.
shipside and watch a ship operation. There's no two ships alike.
Right. And what would you? Now I know you're involved with the Maritime program down at Galveston, right? And we've actually plucked a few interns out of there over the past few years. We do a summer internship program, and we've had a few young ladies that have done that. And I feel really fortunate in that when they leave us, they feel more determined to make this a career than maybe even when they started the summer.
Right.
So I think that's a key aspect to it, because we do see the same thing where we see a young woman say, maybe it's kind of a man's world. Like maybe it's not for me. And
Right.
they leave that 3 months and say, I can do this. This is great. It's
Right.
interesting and it's different every day and it's exciting. And there's actually no barrier for female versus male.
Right.
Right? So are you kind of seeing that and encouraging that when you're involved?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can see, the different young ladies that have stopped at the table and their energy level. Their energy level, to me, is what I key in on, because I have a lot of energy and a lot of positive for the industry.
Sure.
And I've really tried to promote that. And you can tell. It's not necessarily that you're out there on the docks and you're up on top of the ship.
Right.
I mean,
They're
it's not
visual.
right. In their mind, they visualize that. And but you can tell the way that they carry themselves, and the way that they present, because I guess their demeanor or their confidence level. Like, they know, and really I think that's what's going to make you successful.
Sure.
Your confidence that you can do this.
That's relative to anything.
Right. and whether you're, bulling your way through it, but who knows? On the other side, they don't really know that you're kind of just bluffing.
Right. Fake it.
But you make yourself sound good, like you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And then you just pick it up and keep moving from there.
So would that be the tidbit? Is that the advice that you would give these young women?
I would. And then, of course, the big thing is keeping your personal world separate. I think that that's very important.
So you have to keep that line, keep those things separated, but you also have to be really active and involved in your time in the industry, right? And that could be networking and industry events.
The yard operation may be closed, but we've got a vessel tonight, right? So you're the one that's putting yourself out there. You're front and center. You are obviously the center of attention because you are a woman.
Right.
But you make yourself visible to let them know you want to be there.
Right.
Obviously, that's how I developed into going to the transportation intermodal groups. That's how I got started in rodeo. Other ways for me to obviously network in the industry, off the industry,
right.
Whatever it be.
Be present.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember that no matter where you go and what you're doing, I guess my philosophy is they've got cameras everywhere you go.
Yeah.
So you're carrying yourself. You're representing your company. You're representing yourself and your character. I think that's very important.
I think that's a really, really good synopsis on it and a good takeaway, because I've heard a lot of coaches lately saying that it's tough to teach young athletes in today's world, social media and cameras and everything that's prevalent. You're constantly a representation for the uniform you wear outside of just the 3 hours a week you have a game.
Absolutely.
Right? And if we tie that into the same vein, right?
Right.
Just those couple hours in front of that vessel are not the only time that Tiffany wears a Ports America badge.
Absolutely.
Right? Your life has to be an example of
when you're at the airport carrying your backpack, you are representing that company.
Right.
And you want to continue that model.
That standard.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This was fun. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. So we'll come back with another one soon, and appreciate you guys all watching, listening, and we'll catch you later.